Okay, fabulous. Well, welcome everybody to this episode of Churchcraft and a very warm welcome to Judy. Judy, thank you for taking the opportunity to come and be with us and to have dialogue with us about your role at the Cathedral, and how you feel called to lay ministry in general. And there's a whole bunch of questions that the group has put together for you. So we'll work through some of those. But yeah, a big thank you and very warm embrace from all of us here and those who will listen later. Cool. All right. So I'm going to dive in with our first question, which is just to ask you about your journey to be in the Anglican Church, because I'm aware there was quite a journey to get here. So, yeah, if you'd like to share a little bit about how you found the Anglican Church and how you settled.
Okay. You can hear me? Yeah, great. Well, I grew up in Brisbane in a Methodist church that became Uniting. Went through a lot of journey with going through an ecumenical Bible college, listening to various different faith people, from Catholics to Pentecostals to Lutheran to Anglican, and very much settled on the Anglican priest that was teaching. My favourite class at college was on the contemplative life, and it was on Thomas Merton's work. And I hadn't heard of him at that stage. I was quite young. And the lecturer of that course was Father Austin Day, who used to be the priest at Christchurch St Lawrence in Sydney. And so listening to all the different other lecturers, from Pentecostals through to Baptists to everybody else, made me feel a little unsettled. And whenever we came to Father Austin Day's class, it was like, I can breathe now. This is wonderful. And I even went to that church for evensong from time to time when I wasn't on doing prac and things like that. And I had a thought at that time. I used to think, I wish I could be an Anglican. I wish I could belong to the Anglican community. And I don't know what in my mind back then, when I was 19 years old, made me think that I couldn't. But because I didn't grow up that way, the liturgy and all the practices, I felt that it was like a birthright. So it took many years before I realised that that wasn't the case. And many, many years later, my husband and I moved a few times. He was a minister pastor in a Baptist church, and both of us worked in different churches over the years. But when we moved back to Brisbane, we started with the church nearest and just worked our way out till we found a church that would work for us. And wonderfully, we ended up at St Bartholomew's at Mancravat, and had a beautiful several years there with that community. And some of my dearest friends are still from that season. Then we went there, and my husband was a Baptist pastor for a long time, maybe 25 years. And we lived in that world for a long time. He went spectacularly through burnout, and we didn't fit in that. I don't know if anyone else has this experience, but we didn't fit in that world very well with our worldview. We were a little bit more inclusive and expansive. So it was hard leaving that church and denomination and still trying to find a space for us where we felt we could be our authentic selves. I was at the point of even considering that maybe formed religion wasn't ever going to work for us, and I might end up becoming a Buddhist and a Christian at the same time. So it's a big journey, isn't it? And my son Dom, if anyone listens to the On the Way podcast from the Cathedral, my second son Dom hosts that with Dean Peter and Reverend Sue Grimmer. And he invited Peter to come and Peter Cat to speak at his cafe church on a Sunday night. And as Dom was interviewing Peter, he kept looking at my husband Richard and I and laughing, because everything Peter was saying is what we were always saying. And that was a beautiful happenstance, and that's how we ended up at the Cathedral about 8-9 years ago. I'm very happy, and it's wonderful to be there.
Well, that's a little snippet of a long journey, as you said, quite a big journey. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be more questions in our dialogue space. So I did lament to have forgotten to say to everyone, if there are other questions for Judy as we're sharing this recorded part, please feel free to put it in the chat and we'll visit those later if there's anything fresh that comes up. So please make use of the chat, everybody. Feel welcome there. And for those who are watching later, you can also make use of the comment section on YouTube and we can engage there a little bit. But cool, awesome. Well, thank you for that introduction, Judy. And there's a question about how long in finding the cathedral and settling into life there, how long was it before you begin to feel called or invited or pulled towards working as someone who has a pastoral role in the cathedral?
Right. I think we came to the cathedral towards the end of 2016, and towards the end of 2017, Dean Peter talked to me one day about coming and talking to him because he had heard that I'd was planning to resign from my job. I was working at Christian Heritage College, which is a tertiary school, and I worked in the School of Social Sciences as a prac coordinator and also a lecturer first and second year, two subjects which were chaplaincy units. And yeah, so there was a job going at the cathedral. Peter and I talked about it for probably 3 months. It took a long time to work through because somebody left and they were doing areas and I'd say, oh yeah, that's not me, I'm not your person. And oh no, that's not me, I'm not your person, because I know at my age what I do has to energize me or it's just not worth it. I need to be, but it's been my whole life, but especially as I've gotten older, I need to make sure that what I'm doing is what I feel called to do. So over the three to 4 months of conversations with Peter and the wardens, we separated parts of the job and someone took some parts of that job, and pretty much most of what I did was all new and created new, I guess. Yeah.
Quite a process, and I imagine there were layers of complexity as you were unraveling the old job description and then establishing the new one. Would it be okay if you described then what that role description is a little bit like and how you live it out? Because you've got a unique title. But yeah, what is the role? How does it work? Mechanical kind of stuff as well.
Okay, so my title is Community Development Coordinator, and Dean Peter and I regularly discuss that and say how it doesn't at all describe what I do, but we can't come up with a title of what I do because it's not standard what I do. And I don't really need a title, really, I don't think. So my work goes from pastoral care to admin to pastoral care to admin. But any admin I'm doing is around pastoral care, connection, making sure that the websites, I've been working on the website a lot this week, making sure that what's coming up for Lent is accessible and easy to find. I do the social media as well for that. Yeah, and so I'm also involved in we have a pastoral care meeting every week. I'm the only non-clergy member as part of the pastoral care team. As Jamie knows, we're in the same meeting together. Yeah, so I also look after volunteers, but we have coordinators that they coordinate their own teams. So originally they were going to give me part of my title as being volunteer coordinator. And I didn't feel that was a wise name because it would devalue people already doing it in their areas. So better to see me as being a person that's a support person for the leaders than to be someone that's coordinating them. And we've got a wonderful group of volunteers and team leaders already in that space. I think what else I do. I do pastoral care, do visitation. Sometimes I go out and take people when they need to be seen or take to different appointments. Chat to people at coffee on Wednesdays. I think that's just about it. I do the socials, and I said it, and the other things as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, in making a list, there's so many other things in between that happen incidentally that you are just available for as well, Judy. And your availability is something I particularly appreciate and want to magnify in everything you've just shared. So, yeah, Cool, thank you. Well, there was a question as to whether it's always difficult when we're talking about vocation and being called by God, because obviously we listen for God's voice, but do you want to do this until retirement? That's one of the questions we had.
And that's an interesting thing because I'm probably at the age where I could have retired. So I guess I keep saying I'll keep doing it until I don't want to do it anymore. Is that a bad answer?
No, I love that answer. It leaves room for the spirit to work and communicate.
One of my sons says to me regularly, "Mum, I think you should be retired. You shouldn't be working that hard." And I said, "But I'm not working hard because I love what I do, and and I don't want to give up work to babysit your children so you can go." I think that's the motive for him. Yeah. So no, yeah. Who knows what tomorrow holds? But I have great joy and fulfillment in the role that I have. And I love working at the cathedral. I love the community. I love the staff. I love the team we have. We're very collegial. Everyone pulls together. It's a very special place to work, and I feel very fortunate.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, well, changing tack a little bit. That was a little bit of the sort of the intro, talking about your role, but there were some questions around ordained call, whether you'd ever felt a sense of call to perhaps becoming a deacon, and maybe how your role is distinguished from the diaconate as a lay person who has this pastoral care as part of your call and living out of your vocation. So yeah, would you have liked to have been ordained? Was it ever a thing? And yeah, what does the diaconate sort of mean in reflection to your role?
There was times, not necessarily within the Anglican Church, but there were times when I did think of going down some form of ordained ministry. Interestingly, when I married my husband Richard, he was in ministry. I When I got engaged to him, I lost all my ministry opportunities within the church. So that was very much we've been married for 40 and a half years now. And back then it was very much that you couldn't have ministry if you got married in the couple of churches we're involved in. So when he was keen to get married, I wasn't that keen because I thought I'm going to lose out if I marry you. I can stay single and I can still be very active. But I'm glad I married him because he's a nice person and we've had a very nice life. Yeah, so back then, I guess I died to any of those thoughts, and everything I did from that point on was lay ministry. And I still did a lot of lay ministry once we'd left that particular restrictive church that didn't want me. They just wanted me to support Richard and to take a very much quiet back seat. He didn't, but they did. So once we moved past that church, most other churches, he would be the pastor and I would be involved in lay ministry in those, going things from chaplaincy to visitation in schools, visitation in hospital, home visitations, running Bible studies, all the sorts of things that you do in general pastoral life within a church.
Yeah, okay, cool. And with that, because that's obviously some of those things definitely people would probably be familiar with ordained people offering those things as well. But one of the other questions was about your relationship with sacrament and liturgy and how that plays out. And I imagine that would be quite central to the call to lay ministry rather than ordained life. So yeah, what's sacrament for you and liturgy and services in worship?
Yes, so I love the liturgy, and I went to a funeral in another Anglican church just last week, and I was so starved for liturgy because they didn't use any liturgy in that particular church. It had its different flavour, and it's when you leave it and you don't have it that you realise how much you miss it. I love the words of our liturgy. I probably say it, to myself every second day, if not, always saying parts of the liturgy that are really important to me with what's ever happening. And so the liturgy and the sacraments are very important to me. I love the way that the Anglican Church approaches the Eucharist, and I find that so much more sacred than in other denominations I've been in. So that means a lot to me as well.
Yeah, cool. And was there ever a call to be involved in liturgy in a, sacramental way?
Yeah, so I don't have a license to do that. You have to have a liturgical assistance license. But every so often I think about that, but there are so many things I'm already doing that I haven't gone down that way. But it's always something that's in the back of my mind, that if I find myself in this space where I'm taking the Eucharist out to people in their homes and even in the cathedral, I would go forward with that. But at this stage, I haven't. Um, I always focus on what I need to focus on now, and there's a lot at the moment.
Yeah, it's a very full ministry, definitely. There was a question in talking about visits, about the difference between sort of the pastoral work that you do, maybe which is a bit more like lay chaplaincy, and the way that it might compare to hospital chaplaincy in particular. And yeah, was that ever a call for you to be part of hospital ministry?
Well, I used to do a lot of hospital visitation for church, and also someone would ring up and ask if I would go and visit people. In fact, I started doing that before I was even married. I was doing quite a bit of that in Sydney. People would ring up when I worked in a ministry there, and for a while I thought maybe I could do that as a role, as a calling. But having nursed three of having lost all our parents when we were young, in our late, or probably early 30s to late 30s, we lost all our parents in a really short time. And having all of that, all the trauma of hospitals and everything like that, I thought at that point in time, I thought, I don't think I'm emotionally up to doing this. I can go and visit people, but I couldn't do it as a full-time. I don't have this calling for it. That may change down the track. I may have the gifts and the calling then, but at this time, no, not for the whole that side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Too much life experience at the moment to try and cope with that, I think.
Yeah, nice one. Well, maybe changing tack a little bit. There was a lot of questions around well-being in your role, so I might just pop over to that section for a moment. So, yeah, are there any sort of ways that you might refresh or renew your energy when things do get a little bit difficult?
Well, I'm an introvert, and so obviously silence and peace and space is really important to me. We have beautiful trees at the back of our house. We have a park at the back of our house, and we have a park across the road from us behind those houses. So if I look either way, I'm looking at majestic trees and quietness. And so all I need to do is just go and walk to the window and just look out the window. And then
Nice.
I also, one of the things my husband Richard and I do, he's a therapist now, so uh, he has some intense days sometimes too. And we end our day having a decaf coffee and we watch a TV show or something. And that is quite relaxing to watch, depending on the show we're watching. But it's a nice way to wind down at the end of the day.
Mm. And that sounds like that's an important part of balancing family life with your role as well, because there was some interest in how that might work in, very busy cathedral precinct, lot going on. Yeah, how does family fit in or get balanced?
Well, I think because two of my children are married with two children each, and one child, Dom, is not married, but I never see him because he's does two jobs and podcasts, and he's very busy. So we tend to get together maybe once a week. Richard and I are looking after two of our grandchildren every Monday at the moment, since his wife's come back to work. So that's a joy for us. Almost 3-year-old and a 14-month-old, and they're very precious to spend that time with them. And my family, my children and their partners and grandchildren are the best people to me, and the people that are my besties. So, and Richard as well. So we do. I probably let my friends down more than my family.
That's a beautiful statement of, oh, they're my besties. I hope they might listen to this at some point and hear that. Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, thinking then about also other practices that might sustain you, like spiritual practices, there were some questions around the place of prayer in your ministry, if maybe you have some special prayers that you might use for beginning or end of day, as well as prayers that you might use when you're with people pastorally. Yeah, what have you got in your toolbox, Judy? Can you share some with us?
Um, Probably everyone else is the same with this, that you go through seasons of what is particularly appropriate and needed. I've always been a person that prays all day. Like when things happen, I just bring God into my thoughts of, just lift things up to him all the time. Um, and I follow different people that I like, particularly at the moment. I'm loving following Barbara Brown Taylor. I don't know if any of you have heard of her. And she's been on the podcast a few times, and there's another one coming up shortly with her. I just find what she says to be so soothing and so real. Bit like a stream when you're thirsty. It's lovely. And her words. One of the things too that I remember Peter Catt, I think he preached it, but we were discussing about it one day. One of the first things he heard about Barbara Brown Taylor was her teaching on Isaac and Abraham, and how she talked about, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, you may or may not, but she talked about the timeline of when that would have happened. And she said that we often think that Isaac was a child or a very small child. But if you go into more detail, it looks like he was probably in his late 30s. And Abraham was probably in his 60s or 70s. So it shows a very different side of that story, a very violent side of that story, an older man trying to hold down a younger man, a man that was strong. And I noticed that they're not mentioned in being together after that point. And I was having a chat to Richard about that particular scripture last night, and was talking about, because he's done some more study on those things, and he was saying how the word that talks about God, I can't remember what it's called, at the beginning, is more usually a word for gods. And then Yahweh is used when Yahweh says, don't kill your son. You don't need to sacrifice your son. That's actually Jesus, the God, the God. And for me, I mentioned that because having been on a long life of journey of faith, I love that I am continue to be challenged by the word of God and continue to be challenged by things I've just accepted or things that I've been misled with within my thinking. And I love that there's always something new to learn and to grow and understand. Barbara Brown Taylor's comment from today, if I could just read that to you, it was really very appropriate for me today. Not appropriate, but I just a minute. I should have printed it out.
That's all good, Judy. So is this on like a inbox that you can sign?
Yeah, so she does it inbox, or she does them on Instagram and Facebook. But one of the things she said today is, I can respect almost anyone who admits to being human while reading a divine text. After that, we can talk about why we highlight some teachings and ignore others, about how we decide which ones are historically conditioned and which ones are universally true, about who has influenced our reading of scripture and how our social location affects what we hear. The minute I believe I know the mind of God is the minute someone needs to tell me to sit down and breathe into a paper bag. I love that. And then the next comment, the problem with every sacred text is that it has human readers. Consciously or unconsciously, we interpret it to meet our own needs. And I just thought that was beautiful, what I read today.
Yeah, that's
the question that you asked me. I'm just trying.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that leads in really beautifully to another question that there was, which was in speaking with people, do you lean into theology? Are there any guidelines or, I suppose tools that you would use to talk with people about theology in particular, especially when they're maybe feeling that they're at a crisis or a difficult point in their life?
Prior to coming to the cathedral, I very much would have done that. I would have talked to them in any way that they needed. But since being at the cathedral, I respect and honour the role of a priest or a deacon. And so when I'm talking with people and they need to have theological input, I almost always suggest that we get them together with a priest. It's an area I think safest and wisest for me to pass that on from that area. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, let's reflect a little bit more on the team because there were some more questions around what it is like to be, well, perhaps we use our pastoral meeting that we have once a week as an example, the layperson amidst all the clergy. We are very blessed at the cathedral to have so many clergy as part of the team. So yeah, how is that for you, Judy, to be the layperson in that space?
Well, I feel very much a part of it. I feel, yeah, I don't feel less or anything too different. I know that I haven't become ordained, and that's not where I'm headed at this stage. Who knows? I'm still alive. Don't know what will come, but um, I think that, and because we have different roles and different types of clergy team, we have like from full time to part time to honorary to yeah. So it's and then me. So it's a privilege to be part of the team and to be. I feel very much equal with what I contribute. I feel like I am contributing equally. Yeah.
Yeah, and echoed right back at you. That's certainly how I feel about having you on the team. Not to be too mushy or anything, but yeah. There was then also questions about maybe some more of the how your hours are broken out during the week. Like, talked about the breadth of your role and all the different areas you're involved with. But yeah, how many hours do you work? Um, we haven't talked about whether you are paid and how your license works. So if you feel comfortable sharing about that, obviously don't have to, but yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes, I'm actually paid 3 days a week. So it was a paid position I came on to. So I get paid 3 days a week, but I tend to do about 4 or 4.5. And that's no one expects that of me, but I expect that of myself because I'm part of the cathedral community. That's my community, my home, my spiritual home. And so it's important to me that other people in the community volunteer. It's important that I do that as a member of the community as well. So I willingly and gladly do that. I have a work computer at home, which I'm using at the moment, and I have a work computer in the office. So I can move between the two. Generally, I'm at the cathedral on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, half day Wednesday, and then I'm at home. If any of you get the weekly news email I send out Sunday or Sunday night on Mondays, I'm usually doing that on Sunday and Monday at home. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful flexibility and yeah, it there was a question about what service means to you. I feel like you already touched on that in that, paid for this many days, offering more, and that's an expectation that you have of yourself. But yeah, what does service mean to you in your role?
Well, my whole adult life, I've always been involved in some form of volunteering because I always think it's important to be giving beyond myself and not gaining necessarily from it. So I've done lots of volunteer work. Like I used to do volunteer work with child protection with families with children at risk. And that was mostly I'd get some pay, but most of it was volunteers dropping in on families, making sure children were safe, helping the parents with skills. And so I did some within the church and a lot with outside the church. Um, and I grew up with a father that was very, he died when I was 21, so he died a long time ago. But I remember he was always a community minded person. And if you went to a park and you couldn't find him, he was always in the corner, sitting on a chair, talking to someone that was by themselves. That's the kind of person he always was. So that's a great thing to grow up seeing, someone noticing who's on the edges. And I think I either inherited it or learned that from him. Yeah.
That's really special. And there was a question about whether there had been an influence of a holy person, particularly a holy hermit, because obviously we're quite centered on the lives and stories of the holy hermits in our space, but certainly sounds like your dad had holiness as one of his lived experiences, and that was, yeah, part of your influence and inspiration.
And also Thomas Merton, obviously, huge. And I loved for a very long time from my youth St. Francis of Assisi. After seeing the movie when I was a teenager, Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, it was just, and it still sticks with me now, just the impact that movie had on just understanding a very different way of faith to what I'd learned in my church. And yeah, I guess started me on the journey that I took after that. And interestingly, my husband Richard had the same experience from the same movie around the same time, long before we met.
Wow, that's pretty special. And as a little aside, we actually used an excerpt from that movie, the canticle of Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, the song that is sung as Francis goes to the church that had been turned into rubble. We used that as was it our Sir Francis contemplative service, everyone, or was it the animal blessing service? No, it's contemplative, wasn't it? Yeah. So there you go. We've had that very recently at Holy Hermits Online in October.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm thinking for time's sake, we might wind down on the recording now. But there were lots of other questions that we still had, which we will go into further dialogue with now. But before we turn the recording off, I wonder, Judy, if there's maybe any one thing that you would say is your biggest focus at the moment or that's exciting you in ministry that you wanted to share about.
That's a good question. That wasn't on the list, was it?
This is a Jamie question right at the end. Sorry, no warning.
Let me think for a minute. Well, we're in the season of Lent, and it's my favourite season. And I think as we're coming to the special time it is in the cathedral, and I'm sure as well for Holy Hermits online, that there's so much you can do in this space, so much you can. At the moment, I'm doing a lot of that with the website, with social, with just getting everything so that everyone has things that are accessible. I actually love making things accessible for people. I love the fact that people can find what they need when they need it. I don't always do it perfectly, but I do the best I can. And I think we're getting better at doing that, which is good. So I love doing the connections. I love doing the website at the moment because I'm rearranging it and changing the way it's happening. Yeah, and I just love the pastoral care, and I love being with our community, and they're very special. Everyone's very special. Mm-hmm. And my favourite number one thing I love in my whole job is stories and listening to stories. Mm-hmm. I think when someone gives me their time and will tell me their story, I think that's just about the best gift anyone can give me. And I've never heard a story that didn't touch me.
Yeah, and that's definitely the gift that you've given us, your story. So yeah, we will honour that with some further conversation. I'll turn the recording off now, but a big thank you, Judy, for all your sharing and your openness to letting us grill you and ask all these questions and have this reflection. So yeah, I'll turn the recording off now, but big thank you from us. All right.